Could Jawan Johnson return to LSU? You'll hear it from him next. Locked on LSU. Here we go.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked On LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks so much for making it your first listen every day. We are free, available wherever you get podcasts, of course, on YouTube as well. So please subscribe. And as always, one of the fastest ways to help us grow is by leaving your comments below. So thank you sincerely for that. Thank you for helping make the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network in the world. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. And remember, you can watch us on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network. So thanks to everyone who's finding us there. A lot to get into in a jam-packed football edition of Locked On LSU. Austin Thomas headed back to Ole Miss. I think we're going to see even more staff interchange with Ole Miss and LSU. I'll explain that in a bit. Mansoor Delane is an All-American. I'm going to put some context on why that is a massive deal coming up shortly. But I had a chance to visit with LSU defensive back, quarterback, running back, Jawan Johnson. And he, to me, is one of the more fascinating characters in recent LSU football history because by now most people know Jawan's story, right? He went to Lafayette Christian. He finished his high school career as the state's all-time leader in all-purpose yardage, over 14,000 yards, and touchdowns, 171 touchdowns. Think about that, 171 touchdowns during his high school career as a quarterback. Comes to LSU to play defensive back. And he's a 4-star, comes to LSU. He's playing defensive back all throughout fall camp. And boom, John Emery tears an ACL. Trey Holly's not with the team. They need help at running back. They go to Jawan and say, can you play running back? He says, absolutely, whatever you need. So he plays running back last year. They go into spring. And he moves back to quarterback because LSU's really thin on numbers at quarterback. Spends all spring, all fall camp, quarterback. All of a sudden, JT Lindsey finds himself suspended. LSU's thin at running back again. Jawan, can you go back to running back? I'll do whatever you need for the team. And now, 2 years in, he's played in every game during his career, but he's never just solidified at one spot. And so a couple of weeks ago, we found out that Jawan Johnson was planning on entering the transfer portal. So I reached out to Jawan and asked him to come on my radio show, which he did. And so if you want to catch that entire interview, you can. It's After Further Review, YouTube podcast. You can check it out. But I clipped some of the highlights of this interview that I wanted you to hear. And most importantly, I think, Jawan said the reason he's going into the portal is just to see what options are out there that are best for him. And he doesn't really know yet what that's going to be. Is it quarterback? Is it running back? Is it defensive back? Is it a power four? Is it a G6? He doesn't know. It's just to see what might be out there for him. Now, I asked, and this is fascinating, I asked Jawan Johnson if he had talked to Lane Kiffin about a possible return to LSU. And here's what he said.
I really haven't got the chance to talk to Coach Lane Kiffin or any of the new staff yet, but I'm looking forward to.
If they were to ask you, and I don't know, I mean, you would, I don't know if they would, but like if they were to ask you to stay, is that something that you would consider?
It's everything's still in the cards for me, honestly. Like I said, I love LSU. Like, I love being there. So if it was an opportunity and they ask me to stay and they give me the opportunity and the blueprint that I may like, then it is a strong possibility that I might stay. But right now, I'm just looking for the best opportunity for myself to go show my sadness to the world.
It is so important to remember that putting your name in the transfer portal doesn't mean you're gone. Putting your name in the transfer portal just means that other schools can legally contact you. And by declaring that now, every player, every student athlete has an agent. So by declaring his intention to enter the transfer portal, ultimately what Jawan Johnson is saying is call my agent. Call my agent and tell me what opportunities are out there. So by the time you even get to January the 2nd. Jawan Johnson's going to know what's available to him, but he's open to a return to LSU. And let you hear another interaction I had with Jawan in just a quick second, because I think if you don't know much about Jawan Johnson and you haven't fallen in love with him as an LSU Tiger fan, this will make you fall in love with him in just a second. But look, Caden Durham is coming back. Harlem Berry is coming back. But other than that, after Durham Berry, here were your leading rushers. Jawan Johnson was third. Michael Van Buren was fourth. Xavier Thomas, Berrien Brown, Caleb Jackson, Aaron Anderson, Garrett Nussmeier. Those were every LSU Tiger that had a rushing attempt. The only two that are coming back are Durham and Berry. Everyone else, Johnson, Van Buren, Thomas, Brown, Caleb Jackson, Aaron Anderson, Garrett Nussmeier. Well, Van Buren could certainly come back, but remains to be seen, if you will. Point being is that, like, you need depth there. There's a case that Lane Kiffin and his staff could make to say, hey, stay here and work in our offense. We like your skill set and know what to do with you. But this is the thing that I think you will enjoy as an LSU fan. This interaction that I had with Jawan Johnson, I'm going to tell you, I did not cut this. This is a little back and forth he and I had that runs about a minute and a half. So don't, I want you to commit to just listening to this. It's 1 minute and 41 seconds. And I want you to listen to this little back and forth, because I started by asking him if changing positions set him back. Right? Because he came as a DB and then moved to running back, then to quarterback, back to running back. He never got to just settle into a position. So that's where the conversation started, but listen where it went.
It was a difficult challenge. It was definitely difficult. I feel as if it was made easier for me though at LSU. I feel the coaches, like I said, they were great coaches, and it was people around me that helped me to grow in each and every position that I played. But it was definitely a difficult thing going week by week, changing position.
Yeah. If you go back to a year ago when you were a freshman, you came in to be a defensive back, and then they kind of quickly moved you to running back after John Emery had his injury. Do you think about what it would have been like had you stuck at defensive back? Like, is that something that maybe you would have liked to have done during your career here?
I definitely think about that all the time, just having the ability to do both, all of them actually. I always think about every position. What if I just stayed at quarterback coming out of high school? What if I stayed at DB going into college? Like, I think about every position. But at the end of the day, that's all I could do is go forward from now. So I'm just ready to move on. Yeah.
Why were you so willing to change positions when it probably was a hindrance? I think it's fair to say it probably was a detriment to your progress having to change so much. Why were you willing to change positions?
Sure, I love LSU. I love being there. I love playing there. I love the fans and everything that come with. So I just felt like if I want to get on the field as soon as possible, that's what I had to do to get on the field, and that's what I wanted to do that.
Lane Kiffin, how do you not find a place for this guy? Lane Kiffin, how do you not find a spot on your roster for a guy that is one of the most gifted athletes to come out of the state of Louisiana? That's not hyperbole. His track record is what it is. How many people can play DB, quarterback, running back, all and play in every game in their college career so far through 2 years and keep changing positions? Lane Kiffin, that's the guy you want on your team. I love LSU. He says it point blank that he was willing to change positions at his own detriment because he loves LSU. By the way, even though he plans to go in the portal, says he's playing in the bowl game. Here's why.
I just felt like it was time. I had to finish with my team. I started with them, my college journey, and at the end of the day, like, I got to finish with them. We got a strong thing in the running back room. We call RBU. That's what we call it. That's what we call us. That's what we call each other. So at the end of the day, like, we got to stick together, even if I might be leaving and I might not. It's just whatever it is. I got to stick together and with the team, and I got to keep going with them.
I mean, it is exactly the kind of guy that you want on your roster. He loves LSU. He's selfless. He's playing in the bowl game because he's got to finish what he started in an era of me, and I'm okay with that. And by the way, him entering the portal is is a self-centered thing, and they should do that, by the way. You should explore your options. But he's telling you he was willing to change positions because he loved LSU and wanted to get on the field and wanted to play for the fans. And he's telling you right there, he's playing in the bowl game because he wants to finish what he started. Like, that is the kind of guy you wish you had 85 Jawan Johnsons. I love listening to that. Lane Kiffin, you have got to find a role for Jawan Johnson on this roster so he doesn't have to leave. He leaves, you have 2 scholarship running backs. Find a spot for that man on this roster, and you're going to be better for it. Someone who loves LSU, who's willing to do whatever he needs to make the team succeed and find his role on this team. Hopefully, it's still at LSU. And apparently, his words, not mine, that door is not closed. Now, we do know that Mansoor Delane has played his final game as an LSU Tiger, but what a one-year run it was, and the honors come rolling. And I'm going to put some context on how historically significant Mansoor Delane's year in Baton Rouge was. That's next. Locked on LSU, your team every day. The holidays are here, and whether you're hosting family, you're planning the perfect gift, or just trying to keep things simple and delicious, Omaha Steaks is making it easier than ever. From effortless holiday entertaining to unforgettable gifts, Omaha Steaks delivers the world's best steak experience straight to your door. And what makes it even better? With Omaha Steaks, you always know exactly what you're gifting. USDA certified tender steaks, premium proteins, gourmet sides, and decadent desserts that make anyone feel appreciated. Listen, I've sent Omaha Steaks as gifts before, and the reaction is always the same. People say, this is the best gift ever. It's so easy to gift. It shows up frozen. It's packaged beautifully. It's ready to cook, and the steaks are perfectly aged. They're insanely tender. It is restaurant level at home. And you can save big on gourmet gifts and holiday favorites with Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com, and for an extra $35 off, you can use the code COLLEGE at checkout. Terms apply. See site for details. That's omahasteaks.com, promo code COLLEGE. I may have to update this segment in another couple of days, but Mansoor Delane is on the verge of doing something truly historic at LSU. Delane last week was named a first-team All-American by the Walter Camp Foundation, which is a great honor. It's one of the designations that make up the consensus and unanimous All-America honor. So it is it's one of the officially recognized designations. There's a lot of different services that put out All-America teams, but the ones that are officially recognized are the Associated Press, the American Football Coaches Association, the Football Writer Association of America, Sporting News, Walter Camp Foundation. So when you start to put together a unanimous and consensus, unanimous means all of the recognized outlets named the player a first-team All-American. Consensus is when half of them do. So first of all, let's start with the honor that Delane has gotten. He's already been named an All-American by the Walter Camp Foundation. And now Delane, on Monday, was named a first-team All-American by the Associated Press. Again, that is one of the officially recognized organizations. Let me explain why being a first-team AP All-American is significant, okay? The Associated Press put out their first All-American team 100 years ago, 1925. This is 100 years of the AP All-America team. And before you roll your eyes and you complain about 2003 with the AP voting Southern Cal the national championship, forget about all that, okay? Just recognize, understand that these are consensus media voters from around the country that recognize an All-America team, which is the standard as the premier All-America team. You want to be an AP All-American. That is the cream of the crop among all the All-America teams. In 100 years, okay, since 1925, 100 years, Mansoor Delane is just the 37th player in LSU history. In 100 years of AP All-Americans, Mansoor Delane is just the 37th LSU player to be a first-team All-American. The first was Gaynell Tinsley back in 1935. Will Campbell was a first-team AP All-American a year ago. 2 years ago, both Jaden Daniels and Malik Neighbors were first-team All-Americans. Let me narrow it down even further. Mansoor Delane becomes just the 9th LSU defensive back to earn AP first-team All-America honors. Now, Tommy Casanova was the first back in 1970. And then Craig Stelz was the next in 2007. Actually, it was LaRon Landry in 2006. So LaRon Landry in 2006, Craig Stelz in 2007. This was the DBU era, okay? Pat Pete in 2010, Tyron and Mo Claiborne both in 2011, Grant Delpit in 2018, Derek Stingley in 2019, and now Mansoor Delane. Okay, LSU's had lots of first-team All-Americans. Tre'Davious White had first-team All-American honors. I can go down the list of a lot of great players that had first-team All-American honors. But we're talking about by the Associated Press, one of the 5 recognized bodies to crown first-team All-America honors. So again, just Delane, the 37th player in LSU history to be a first-team AP All-American. You got 85 scholarship players every year. He's the 37th in the history of the program to be first-team All-American. And the 9th defensive back, okay? And Mansoor Delane now, because he has been a Walter Camp first-team All-American and now an Associated Press first-team All-American, all he needs is Football Writers Association of America or the American Football Coaches Association or the Sporting News, any of these other outlets, name him a first-team All-American, which certainly one will. They all should, by the way. But he needs one more, and he will become a consensus All-American. In the history of LSU football, there are only 29 consensus All-Americans. I'll read off the names if you want. Gus Tinsley, Gaynell Tinsley, Gus Tinsley, Ken Kavanaugh, Sid Fournette, Mike Anderson, Tommy Casanova twice, Burt Jones, Charles Alexander twice, Wendell Davis, Alan Faneca, Chad Kessler, Josh Reed, Chad Lavallee, Marcus Spears, Ben Wilkerson, LaRon Landry, Craig Stelz, Josh Jasper, Tyrann Mathieu, Eric Reed, Leonard Fournette, Tre'Davious White, Devin White, Greedy Williams, Grant Delpit, Derek Stingley, Jaden Daniels, Will Campbell. That is the distinguished list of LSU Tigers, the 29 times LSU Tigers have been named consensus All-Americans. And Mansoor Delane most certainly is going to add his name to that list. He also has a chance to be a unanimous All-American. And in LSU football history, that has happened just 13 times. Gus Tinsley in 1936, Billy Cannon twice in 58 and 59. Roy Winston in 1961, Jerry Stovall in 1962 when he got totally robbed by the Heisman. From 1962 when Jerry Stovall was a unanimous All-American, it didn't happen again until 1987, 25 years later, when Nacho Albergamo received that honor. And then after Nacho Albergamo, it was another 20 years before Glenn Dorsey did it. Then Patrick Peterson, Morris Claiborne in consecutive years, Grant Delpit in 2018, Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase in 2019, and then Malik Neighbors in 2023. Understand that Jaden Daniels in his Heisman year wasn't even a unanimous All-American, as stupid as that is, but it is the fact. It's only happened 13 times in the history of LSU football. And Mansoor Delane has an outstanding shot, certainly almost a lock, to be a consensus All-American and very well could be a unanimous All-American. So understand that no matter how old you are, how long you've been watching LSU football, I just read off a bunch of names to you. In the history of this football program, we've only seen a consensus All-American 29 times and a unanimous All-American 13 times. We probably just watched another one this year in Baton Rouge with Mansoor Delane. What 1 year in Baton Rouge, but what a year it is. We have to reframe our brain, y'all, to understand in this portal era, we may see greatness, but we may only see it for 1 year. So appreciate the greatness for whenever you get it. My goodness, was Mansoor Delane absolutely amazing in this season. And to do so with that core injury through the entire season makes it even more incredible what we watched. Now, he probably got screwed out of the Thorpe Award. They gave it to Caleb Downs because it's an award that in those national awards, name recognition matters, and Caleb Downs has been on everybody's radar now for 3 years. But Mansoor Delane was the best defensive back in college football this year, deserved to win the Thorpe Award, but a unanimous or consensus All-American honor will certainly do. Congrats to Mansoor Delane, who continues racking up the hardware, and it is much deserved. Well, one more quick segment to get to, and there's more turnover on the LSU staff and more interchange between LSU and Ole Miss. We'll explain next. It's Locked on LSU, your team every day. The World Cup is coming back to North America for the first time since 1994, and with 48 teams for just the first time ever, it's going to be massive. But let's be honest, getting tickets is usually the hardest part. That's why the Game Time app is clutch, finally giving fans a real advantage when it comes to snagging seats. With Game Time, you can track price drops in real time. You can get alerts when great seats open. You can buy tickets the moment they hit the app. It puts the power back in your hands and makes going to the World Cup realistic instead of impossible. Look, the seat view feature, it's a game changer. You literally see what the pitch looks like from your exact seat before you buy. And I love my favorite feature. The price includes the fees up front. So there's no last second surprises at checkout. Take the guesswork out of buying World Cup tickets and every match, concert, or event with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, download the app, make an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go, Game Time. Going to wrap up the show in just a second, but I want to thank you for making Locked On LSU your first listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. You already live your team every day. Now take it up a level and go ad-free. Join the Everydayer Club. Get the Locked On LSU podcast with no interruptions, members-only Discord access, and more, all for just $5 a month or $50 a year. Go check out the link in the show notes to learn more. Well, there was a report hat tip to our buddy Chase Parham from Rebels 247. He was first to have it, that Austin Thomas is headed back to Ole Miss. Of course, if you're not familiar, Austin Thomas just finished his third stint at LSU as the general manager. But when Lane Kiffin took the LSU job, he brought his general manager, Billy Glasscock, with him from Ole Miss. It's also notable as well that Austin was at Ole Miss working under Lane Kiffin for 2 seasons, 2022, 2023, before he was hired at LSU for his third stint. Now, it was Scott Woodward who hired Austin Thomas. And I know when Lane Kiffin was hired, there were a lot of people who thought this was probably a pretty clear indicator that Austin Thomas would be retained because Austin had been at Ole Miss. And if you're an everydayer, and shout out to our everydayers, you probably heard us talk about it here. I don't know all of the ins and outs, but it was made abundantly clear to me that it was unlikely Austin would be retained. I think I could speculate, and this would be pure speculation, but I could speculate that maybe Lane Kiffin wasn't really excited that Austin left Ole Miss for LSU, that he left an SEC program that Ole Miss plays every year and went to that rival, especially after seeing the inner workings of how Ole Miss was running their front office, so to speak, and then maybe bringing a lot of that information to a team that LSU played every year. So when Lane Kiffin was hired, I think it was pretty obvious from jump, to me anyway, from a lot of conversations I had, that Austin wasn't going to be retained. Now, what I do think is really interesting is Austin going back to Ole Miss tells you the respect that Pete Golding has for Austin Thomas and the job Austin did there in Oxford for the 2 years he was there before coming to Baton Rouge for the last 2 years. Now, I also just think it's an interesting paradigm as far as the time in college sports. You know, Brian Kelly was a guy that didn't really embrace the GM role component. He said it openly. I mean, it's one of the reasons he never took an NFL job is he didn't want to relinquish control of the roster like you would in a GM, like in an NFL model. And obviously this was a Scott Woodward hire to bring Austin to Baton Rouge. And So with Scott Woodward gone and then Lane Kiffin coming in and maybe not being thrilled that Austin left Ole Miss, I think this was a foregone conclusion. But going back to Ole Miss, I think speaks to the respect that Pete Golding and the folks at Ole Miss have for Austin from his time there. And I've said it here many times. I think Austin Thomas is a super smart guy. I think he is brilliant. He's excellent what he does. I think going up to Seattle and mirroring and shadowing the Seahawks organization to learn how they put together their roster and board and allocate funds and all that sort of stuff, and then brought those ideas back to Baton Rouge. I thought that was very progressive, the way that he handled all of that. And, it's going to be interesting to watch this staff crossover because obviously you got a lot of guys that have come from Ole Miss with Lane Kiffin to Baton Rouge. But similarly now you've got Austin going back to Ole Miss. Kelvin Bolden, remember, has now been hired in a recruiting capacity back at Ole Miss. Remember, Kelvin Bolden was at Ole Miss, was hired by Austin Thomas at LSU 5 months ago. Well, now he's going back. He's already back at Ole Miss under Pete Golding and working there with Austin Thomas. And I think there's probably going to be more. The most interesting will be what happens with Frank Wilson and Kevin Smith. You see, Lane Kiffin could certainly retain Frank Wilson. But if he doesn't and brings Kevin Smith over, the running backs coach from Ole Miss, I think there's a real possibility Frank Wilson could end up at Ole Miss working on Pete Golding's staff. And if you have Pete Golding from Hammond, Kelvin Bolden, Austin Thomas, and Frank Wilson, all with deep ties in Louisiana, working at Ole Miss, they could certainly make a lot of hay in Louisiana in recruiting to get some kids out of this state to try to get them to Oxford. This is a storyline that shouldn't be overlooked. If Pete Golding keeps building a deeper roster of coaching staff and front office people with Louisiana ties, it could challenge Lane Kiffin here in Louisiana recruiting. Something we'll follow as we continue here on Locked on LSU, where we appreciate you for making us your first listen. So please subscribe on podcast, YouTube. Thanks for watching on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network, and for letting a friend know that if they love the Tigers, we got you here every single day. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day.